Hey, everybody, I'm Craig Zingerline, and I'm here to talk about how to leverage customer intent and experimentation to find and scale your customer acquisition channels. I run a company called Velocity Growth, and I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for tuning in. So, the first question for you is, why do some startups make it while so many startups are doomed for failure? I think we all know these stats. Over 90% of startups are going to fail, oftentimes within the first couple of years. Well, what separates those startups that make it versus the ones that don't? I'm going to dig into this today. I'm going to show you some steps that I think you should think about as you're growing your startups. Now, I've studied this for a while now, startup failure. And what I've seen, whether it's from a source like Startup Genome or from some of the other sources out there like Business Insider and CB Insights, and even just anecdotally talking to founders, is the same set of themes that come up over and over and over again when it comes to growing our startups. And frankly, some of the reasons why we end up failing. So, first of all, we build our teams quickly. We look at customer acquisition and we try to scale that up. We write more code. We try to build perfect products. And we put these things out there. And what we realize a lot of times is that we just don't have the demand that we thought we were going to get when we set out to build this company and go amongst our journey. And this is really, really scary stuff. And I've been here a couple of times with some of my own startups, and I've seen this over and over and over again when advising or investing in companies or even being in-house. You end up with a too big of a team. You spend too much money on a too perfect product. And then you realize at some point that you need to pivot. And you may realize that two or three times early on. And this is absolutely brutal. You talk about the startup roller coaster, and this is it. This is the epitome of it right here. And this is a really tough spot to be as a founder and as an early stage team. So what do you do about this? I'm going to boil it down for you really, really quickly and just make a fairly bold, bordering on obnoxious statement, but I think it's true. I think you probably don't know your customer as well as you think you do. And I really want you to take that to heart. I would really press you to think about how well you know your customer. Do you know where they hang out? How much they're willing to pay for your solution? Are they looking for a solution? How do they find you? These are all themes that will emerge as you dive deeper and deeper into your model. And what this often means is that your marketing and your product development are not only not optimized, but they also may be failing you. I'm going to walk you through how to start thinking about this and how to figure out how to do marketing and to some degree product management based mostly on how we think about messaging and customer acquisition. So what do we do? What do we do to prevent this failure? I will urge you to reset how you think about customer acquisition and retention by going all the way back up to the top of your business and thinking about customer intent and messaging, what you're putting in front of other humans who are getting exposed to your brand, and how you do that regardless of what channel you happen to be working in. Okay, so the first thing that I want to walk you through is I want to walk you through how to think about intentionality. So I put this deck together with what I'm calling the law of intentionality and customer acquisition. There's no law here. There's no rocket science. This is just how one, I think, should be thinking about the customer intention process. So let's pick a starting point. So you start up here. The first question that you want to ask yourself, regardless of kind of what stage you're in, if you're exploring new channels, this is also relevant, but this is also very, very applicable to early and mid-stage startups who haven't figured it all out yet. So the first thing to ask is, what is the intent level of my buyer or of my user or of that persona that I'm going after? Is the user aware of a problem? Yes or no? So if you have a very low intent persona that you're going after, then it's actually your job to build awareness and to point out a problem or solution for that person. And it's likely that the channels that are going to be most effective for you, at least early on, are going to be things like paid social and influencers, potentially product led growth, and other referral and kind of viral loops that you want to build into your product. The higher you move up the enterprise market, that's actually a lot harder to do. If the user is aware that they have a problem and they don't know that there's a solution, or they know that there's a solution for it, but they don't yet have a solution for it, they're going to go and search for that. And that means that you need to be strong on paid search and on organic search and in those other high intent channels where your buyer is quite literally searching for a solution or searching for the pain point solution, the vitamin or the painkiller that they need to make their lives better. So then what you're doing is you're feeding your conversion loop. So again, referral and word of mouth and out of home advertising, these kind of sit as outliers. I would also argue that a lot of your product led growth sits kind of at this next level down in your growth loop. So you've got a website or an app visit, then you've got an endpoint acquisition goal where you're capturing an email or a trial or a PQL, or you're getting them to install something. Maybe it's an app. Then you've got an activation strategy. And then you want to look at, okay, well, is there a conversion? Is there conversion potential from this set of channels that I'm working in? Yes or no? And if no, then you probably need to go back to the drawing board. If yes, you're going to want to build a strong retention strategy. So once you have a good sense of your customer intent and you've done a little bit of that discovery and groundwork there, the next thing that you're going to want to do is a bunch of experimentation. Now, what we're looking for during this stage is a number of things. Number one, clear messaging that resonates with one or more of your personas. It's worth pointing out that we often get our early persona research wrong. As a founder, we have a hypothesis on who may or may not be a great fit. We build an ideal customer profile, and then we put a bunch of stuff in front of them, and often it falls flat. So what we're trying to do with this next phase, once we kind of understand that intentionality, is build messaging and test messaging that can resonate with one or more personas. And oftentimes that means eliminating stuff that's not working. You also want to look for clearly defined buyer segments. So if you've got a persona that is just in a tiny, tiny segment that you're not able to monetize, it's going to be really hard for you to grow your company. Third thing is you have to really quickly get to understanding the customer's willingness to pay, which also will force you to think about price elasticity. You're then going to want to think about conversion drivers. And those are the things that will take the user or your lead from a general awareness standpoint into an actual user. And again, you can use the product to do that. You can use sales to do that, and you can use marketing to do that. But at this point in time, what you're looking for is a clear understanding of what those conversion points are going to be. Then you're going to look at constraints based on data and pricing that you're putting in front of potential consumers. And again, this is regardless of what industry you're in and whether you're product led or sales led or marketing led or some kind of combination. You're going to have to get to a point where you understand that data that you have on pricing as it relates to a constraint, which is the thing that often will push somebody to go to the conversion point that you want and ideally become a revenue driver for you. And then from there, you'll have a clear understanding of some of your growth channels. And so next, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at what this process looks like in the wild. So I call this the message persona flow. So you start up here, and then what you're first going to do, whether it's yourself or your team, is look at some of the value props and benefit statements that you can put together for your product. And this sounds really kind of fluffy and high level, and to some degree it is, but it's really, really important that you go back up to the top, highest level. You start to document what is that value prop that I'm putting into the world that makes somebody want to engage with me. And you're going to do that from a benefit, not a feature-driven standpoint. Then you need to spend a little bit of time building out your persona. Now, I'm not going to get into all of the weeds there. There's platforms you can use to build ideal customer profiles or persona mapping. You've probably already thought a bunch about this. Here's the deal. For personas, what you need to understand is if you're in the B2B space at least, what is the job title and industry type and company size that your persona embodies? And so if you're an enterprise company versus an SMB company selling into different segments, that persona is going to be wildly different. But I would urge you to think about the job title itself, the role itself that your persona has in their day-to-day life, and use that to determine what you put in front of them. If you don't get that granular, then you're going to end up in a situation where you likely don't have enough data at the granular level for a persona to say, okay, well, this type of role, this job title, yeah, they're my user. They're the ones that will end up purchasing and buying. So it's really important that you figure that out, but don't agonize it over it. Just get started. Write them down in a bullet point list and map that out. Then what you're going to do is you're going to experiment on your offer. And what your offer is it's a message or multiple messages in creative or multiple creatives. And you're going to put that in front of this persona. And what you want to figure out is that offer resonating with them? Well, how do you determine that? You're going to look at things like click-through rates and general engagement. So for example, if you send a cold email out to 100 people with a message against a persona, you're going to know relatively quickly if that offer resonates. Well, how are you going to do that? You're going to look at the open rate from the platform, and you're going to maybe look at click-through rates or replies. If you're running paid ads, say you're running Instagram ads, you're going to know pretty quickly based on that engagement, the likes, the shares, all of the other data that comes back from the platform, and probably a click over to what that next step of your funnel is going to be. So that's great. Now, if you find that you just don't get any clicks or you don't get any general engagement, it's generally safe to say that for that particular persona, either your offer is wrong or you've got the wrong persona. But it's really hard at this point to determine if it's the right or wrong persona. So you can test different personas via this offer methodology and do that in a rapid fashion and test 10 different personas with 50 different offers and see what resonates. In either case, the next step is going to be you want to present packaging. Now, often this packaging happens at your website level. So if you're using product-led growth to get in front of people, they're going to see your product, they're going to see your pricing. And ideally, what you're doing is you're bumping the user up against one or more constraints that puts them in a spot where they either need to sign up for something, try out the product, book a demo, right? These are conversion drivers that are the step before you actually have a viable conversion. And so you're going to measure this now by the number of leads or PQLs or some kind of sales metrics. And what you're looking for is, are the conversions viable based on this offer and this packaging? And if the answer is yes, and you can do this successfully over and over again across a few different channels, you've got persona fit. And now you're at a point where you can probably start to scale out how you go to market against this persona. So that's how you look at it from a singular view, a single persona. What I would do next is I would start to replicate this process and put it against different personas. Once you do this once, it's a lot easier to leverage this framework for net new personas and to get your messaging tests and offer tests and packaging tests in front of them. Look, if you have no success spending a bunch of time here against a persona, it may mean that there's just not a fit for that persona. And you need to go back to the drawing board, determine those value props, understand that persona, document that, and run through that same process again. There's no shortcuts. You have to go through this loop before you'll fully understand, without a lot of guesswork, what's happening to your audience as it relates to your product. Okay, moving on. I've got a couple ideas here that I want to share with you. So again, run rapid paid experiments to learn about the offer. So remember, the offer is the creative and the messaging. Paid acquisition channels are a phenomenal way where you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can spend literally $5 to $10 to $20 a day and learn just about as much as you need to know about the messaging to move to the next step, where now what you're doing is you're putting the packaging in front of the user. So again, packaging is pricing and how you showcase that. It's constraints and leveraging those to try to drive to a conversion. Then what you can start to do is run multiple channels, but have the same offer and packaging. So for example, I could build an experiment, and this is often what I'll do with new ideas, is I'll put together a cold email campaign. So once I understand my persona, I'll put together a cold email campaign, an organic social campaign, a paid social campaign, and then something potentially higher intent. Maybe it's buying some keywords, or maybe it's working an existing lead list that I have, or maybe it's looking at using a referral loop to run some experimentation on. Once I do this, what I'm then looking for is viability at the experiment level, so that I know that for one persona and a messaging and an offer and a package, I now have data on 1 through 5 different channels that I can learn from. And then what I do is I move it into this channel scale mode. And so at this point, once you understand that persona and the message and the packaging, you can start to think about scaling up, and you can ramp up scale and scale your campaigns once you lock in these different variables. And then what you can start to look at is your next potential channel. It's always a cost or time versus your return on investment. So if you're thinking, well, I don't have a huge budget for paid, or I don't even have any budget for paid, I would urge you to think about a minimal budget to get through the experimentation that you need to really understand this persona and the message and the packaging, and vice versa. If you don't have a lot of time, you could spend money. If you don't have a lot of money, you can spend more time. So think about kind of your founder channel fit and where you're most comfortable and where you'll want to spend that time, and lead with those channels to do this type of work. And then what we can start to think about is feature fit. So once you have a sense of, from the marketing and product world, okay, well, these are the messages, this is the content, this is the pricing, this is the package, these are the constraints that work. You can now start to think about, from a product management standpoint, looking at the features that you're working on and that are in your backlog, and putting those against the personas that you know and understand work well. And you've learned a lot of that really quickly through this rapid experimentation process. And what you do here is you run customer discovery, and you put early feature and product concepts in front of a potential set of users and see how they react and see how they convert. Likely, this means that you need to do a bunch of customer discovery. So I would really, really, really urge you to think about an experiment-led product roadmap and a kind of core product roadmap. And ideally, you're working cross-functionally between sales, marketing, and product to pull it all together, just like you're doing with product-led growth. It's multidisciplinary. What you want to do is you want to get all of those people together in a room to talk about what's happening at the top and middle of funnel, and then what's happening at the roadmap level, so that you can share those ideas and stories, you can share the data, and you can use that to inform your product and your feature strategy as you move forward. Because it's a lot easier and faster to iterate at the ad and message level than it is at the feature level. You're generally going to be more resource constrained on the engineering side. So that's it for my talk. I hope you found it useful. Please reach out to me with any questions, and good luck. Thank you.